A long-hidden truth has hit Harry like a storm crashing through years of silence and hidden pain. As King Charles revealed Diana's final words, Harry broke down in tears, unable to hold back the flood of emotion. The weight of the moment crashed down on him as secrets came to light, forcing him to relive the heartbreak of losing his mother. Shock, grief, and betrayal collide, and one devastating moment. What Diana said before her final breath isn't just surprising, it changes the future of the monarchy forever. Join us as we uncover why those words were silenced until now. From a mother to her son. The moment didn't feel planned. It didn't come with any specific reason or instructions. Prince Harry had flown in for a short visit, not expecting much. He had grown used to keeping his guard up. Every time he stepped into royal circles again, old wounds came up. He had tried to keep his distance, tried to stay strong. But on that day something broke through all that space. Charles asked to meet him alone. No staff, no cameras, no advisors waiting outside, just the two of them. Father and son. That by itself was rare enough. But what happened next left Harry frozen. Just then Charles reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. The paper looked aged, handled many times, but hidden safe. Without saying much, Charles handed it over. Harry stared at it for a second. The handwriting on the front made his heart stop. He knew it instantly. It was his mother's. His hands started to shake. He took the envelope and sat down. For a long time he didn't move. Then slowly he opened it. Inside was a letter, not long but heavy. Every line was full of emotion, full of words that felt like they had waited decades to be read, and she had written it before her passing. She must have known somehow that he would need these words later in life. She didn't talk about events or people. She spoke straight from the heart. Her words were warm, strong, protective. She spoke to the son. She loved the letter, didn't try to fix anything, it didn't blame anyone, it simply reached out across time, as if she knew one day Harry would need to be reminded of who he really was. Harry couldn't read it all at once. He had to stop several times. The emotions came up like waves. One line struck him deeply. It felt like a light switched on inside, a line that reminded him to hold on to himself, to keep following his heart. The same heart that had led him away from royal duty, the same heart that had taken so many hits from the press, the public, even his own family. All this time he had been searching through interviews, through his book, through therapy. He had worked hard to sort through the pain, to speak out, to take charge of his story. But now in this letter his mother spoke in a way no one else could, and it went deeper than anything he had tried before. Charles didn't say much. He stayed in the room watching his son read the letter. Maybe he was unsure what would happen. Maybe he was bracing for a reaction. But Harry didn't lash out. He didn't ask why this was being given to him now after so many years. Not yet. He was still inside the moment, still holding on to every word like it was air after drowning. It felt like the world and paused. There was no pressure in that room, just a father giving his son a part of his mother bag, and a son finding pieces of himself through the voice he had missed for most of his life. This wasn't just about grief. This was about being seen, about being known. The letter reminded Harry that he hadn't imagined the bond he shared with Diana. It confirmed that what he had always believed was real, that she would support him even now. He had grown up feeling watched but not understood. He had tried to break away, to build a new life with Meghan, to raise his children away from the same pressures. But no matter how far he had gone, a part of him was still missing. That letter helped bring it back. After he finished reading, Harry didn't speak right away. He held the letter in both hands. His eyes were wet, his jaw was tight, but he wasn't angry. He was moved deeply. Something inside him had shifted. He didn't ask why it had taken so long. He didn't push Charles for answers, not yet, because at that moment the emotions were too strong. There would be time for questions later. Right now he just wanted to hold on to the field. Charles looked affected. He wasn't crying, but his face had changed. For once he looked like a father, not a king. That letter didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the pain of the past, but it opened something. It gave Harry a form of consolation, something to believe in again. Not about the crown or his duty, but about his own story, his own truth. The timing of the letter felt important. It didn't come when he was a teenager full of grief, but still under control. It didn't come when he got married or when he became a father. It came now, when he was still working through the hardest parts of his journey. And maybe that's what made it matter even more, the history and secrecy of the letter. The letter had always been there, tucked away, untouched, unseen for more than 2 decades. It never came up. People spoke about Diana's, his life, her legacy, her voice, but no one ever mentions the letter. It had been kept under wraps, hidden deep in the crew wax of royal history, far from the public, and even from Harry himself. No one outside the palace truly knew where the letter had been kept. Some believed it stayed locked inside the royal archives, surrounded by other family documents. Others thought Charles had held onto it himself for personal reasons. Whispers had circled for years. A few staff members knew it existed. They had seen it or heard about it, but they didn't bring it up. They didn't try to go through it. Maybe they were afraid, maybe they believed they were protecting someone, or maybe they were told to leave it alone. Whatever the reason, the letter stayed hidden. The people who worked inside the royal household were trained to hold back. They didn't ask too many questions. They followed the chain of command and kept their heads down. They would not risk stepping on sensitive ground. Charles himself may have struggled with the letter. Maybe he couldn't bring himself to read it. Maybe he read it once and never touched it again. The letter carried more than just words. It carried history, heartbreak, guilt, and memories that couldn't be pushed aside. Holding onto it meant carrying all of that. Giving it away meant letting go. That choice may have weighed heavily on him. If something as emotional as a letter from Diana surfaced, especially one written close to her demise, he likely avoided reading. The exact timing of the letter's delivery raised eyebrows. Why now, after all these years? Why, after so much damage had been done between father and son? Why, after Harry had left the country, spoken out, written a book, and taken his distance? The decision to hand over the letter didn't come across as casual. It looked deliberate, and that made people wonder what pushed Charles to finally give it up. It could be that he kept it as something too painful to face. However, some believed it came from guilt. Maybe after watching everything Harry had been through, Charles finally broke down and opened the drawer. Maybe he had watched his son carry pain that he knew could be softened even slightly by Diana's words. Others saw it as a strategic move. They believed Charles wanted to shift the narrative. With the royal family under constant pressure, the letter could be seen as a way to patch things up, or at least take some of the heat off. No matter the reason, the secrecy behind the letter added to its power. For more than 25 years it had been buried under protocol, fear, and indecision. And when it finally came to light, it didn't just bring emotion, it brought questions about how many other pieces of Diane, his voice, might still be buried. Questions about what the palace had chosen to hide, and questions about whether this was the only letter she ever wrote. Someone had held on to something deeply personal, something meant for Harry, and chose not to share it until much later. That choice created a wound of its own. Harry all this time had been kept in the dark. He had spoken about feeling left out, about not being told the full story. And now this moment added one more layer to that feeling. He didn't explode when he got the letter. He didn't break down the walls. But he carried the weight of that long delay. He had walked through so much pain alone. He had looked for his mother's presence in dreams, memories, and photographs. And all that time her real words said somewhere behind closed doors, waiting to be handed over. Diana had always tried to keep her boys close. She had spoken with them, guided them, stayed present, even when the pressure got too much for her to write a letter and leave it behind showed that she had thought ahead. She had wanted her love to reach Harry when he needed it most, but somebody or a group of people had stepped in and made a choice to hold it back. That act changed the shape of Harry's grief. Pooh! Not so much as devil's principles with the loss, but I am about the people behind the decision. It turned something meant to heal into something layered with confusion. The letter had come sooner, things might have played out differently, maybe Harry would have felt more grounded, maybe he would have handled some moments with more peace. But that wasn't how it happened. The delay became part of the story. It shaped how the letter was received, and it shaped how Harry looked at his family. And now with this letter finally out, people started asking what else had been locked away. They started looking at the palace differently, wondering what truths had been held back. The letter was never just paper and ink, it was a message frozen in time. And the fact that it had been tucked away for so long gave it more weight. It showed how much power one voice could still hold even after being gone. And it showed how the decision to hide or share that voice could leave deep marks. Now that the letter had finally reached Harry, the story began to shift. But the path it had taken, the secrecy, the waiting, the handover, could not be reversed. It had left its own impact, and it became a reminder that sometimes what's hidden doesn't stay married forever. Breaking down walls. Harry held the letter tightly. He had just read through it, but the words were still running through his mind. His chest felt heavy, his throat was tight. The feelings he had pushed down for so many years started to rise. He had tried to move on with life. He had built a new home, made a new family, and stepped away from everything royal. But now with the letter in his hands, all the emotions came back. He sat down slowly and looked around the room. It was just him and Charles. It was one of the rare times they were left alone. He didn't speak right away. He kept staring at the letter, holding it like it was something fragile. His breathing got heavy. His face showed everything: the hurt, the confusion, the cost of all the years they had lost. Charles didn't say much either. He stood nearby, watching his son fall apart little by little. Harry wasn't shouting or blaming anyone. He was just breaking down in front of him, not as a prince, but as the son. For the first time in a long while, the crown didn't matter. There were no rules to follow, no duty to perform, just a father and son stuck in the middle of pain. Harry wiped his eyes with the tears. Didn't stop. The letter had opened up something deep inside him. For years he had covered up the grief with work, responsibility, and distance. He had moved across the ocean, taken up causes, and spoken out against the pressure he had felt. But even with all that, the sadness had never gone away. It had just waited for the right moment to come out. That moment was now. He looked down again and read one part of the letter over and over. Each time it hit him harder. It was something his mother had written that touched his heart. She had reached across time, across pain, and held on to him with her words. He felt like she had seen the road ahead. She had known that one day he would feel lost, and she had left something behind to help him find his way again. As he sat there, his shoulders started to shake. He didn't care who was watching. He didn't try to hide it. He let the tears fall. He let the emotions roll over him. He had spent so much time holding things in. Now he just let go. Charles stepped forward. At first he didn't know what to say, but then slowly he reached out and put a hand on Harry's shoulder. It wasn't anything much, but it meant something. For a moment he let go of being king. He let go of everything else. He just stood beside his son, not above him. Then he sat down next to him. They didn't speak. That small act, sitting beside him instead of across the room, brought a small shift. It was the first step toward something different. It didn't settle the issue at hand, but it started to break down the wall between them. Harry leaned forward and covered his face with his hands. The pain had finally reached the surface. He wasn't thinking about what people might say. He was simply a man missing his mother. And now that he had her words in his hands, it became harder to hold in all the feelings he had carried for so long. Meanwhile, Charles didn't pull away. He stayed there next to him, silent but present. It was the first time in years that Harry had felt something real from him, not duty, not pressure, just a father trying to show care, and the only way he could. For once they were not standing on opposite sides. They had come closer without saying a word. As the minutes passed, Harry began to sit up again. His eyes were red, his hands shook a little, but he looked stronger. Not because the pain had gone away, but because he had let it out. He had allowed himself to feel it, to break down, to face the sadness and not push it away. He looked over at Charles and gave a small nod. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't a full reunion, but it was something, a sign that he had seen the effort, that he had felt comfort. They didn't go into the past, they didn't talk about the choices that had brought them to this point. They just sat there side by side with the letter bit too. Between them, it had brought them together in a way that nothing else had. Later, when Harry stood up and walked out of the room, he took the letter with him. He didn't let go of it. He didn't fold it or hide it away. He kept it in his hand. That piece of paper had changed something inside him. It had broken down a wall, and in doing so it opened a small door between father and son. They didn't make promises, they didn't draw up plans, but in that short time together they saw each other in a different way. Not through titles or roles, just as two people tied together by lost by memory, and now by a letter that had waited far too long to be delivered. That meeting didn't make everything right, it didn't erase the years of distance, but it gave both of them something to hold on to, a real moment. And sometimes one real moment is all it takes to start again. Harry left the meeting carrying that letter like it was treasure. He didn't utter a word to anyone, but those who saw him later noticed a difference. He looked tired but stronger, like someone who had finally found a missing piece. That one letter did what years of speeches and public efforts could not. It brought Harry back to something he could try. Just it didn't erase the past, but it made it easier to face, and from that day forward, no matter what else happened, Harry carried his mother's words, not just in his heart, but in his hands. The broader effect of the letter. The moment Harry walked out with the letter in his hands, something had already started to shift. Nothing had been announced to the world. Good stories have a way of slipping out. Before long, the press caught wind of it. A few whispers turned into full reports. And just like that, people everywhere began to talk. News outlets picked it up quickly. They began digging into details, where the letter came from, why it was given to Harry now, and what it might mean for the royal family. Some reporters tried to speak with palace staff, others searched through old records. Social media picked it up. Next posts started to spread. People began to give their thoughts, their opinions, and their feelings. Some believed it was a kind and honest move from King Charles. They felt touched by the story. They imagined how much the letter must have meant Harry. Others weren't so sure. They asked why the letter had been hidden for so long. They pointed fingers, wondering if it had been part of a bigger plan. Some people thought Charles was trying to fix things too late. Others said it was never about fixing, it was about timing. The media didn't hold back. They broke the story into parts. Each article focused on something different. Some talked about Harry's reaction, others looked at the letter itself, some guessed it, what Diana might have written. Even though the full letter was never shown, headlines filled the screens. Interviews followed. Old royal experts were brought back on television to explain what might happen next. The royal family was used to public attention, but this felt different. It was about something deeply personal, and the public held on to that. People didn't just want headlines, they wanted to feel the story. They wanted to understand how something so personal could change so much. Before long, people around the world started talking about Diana again. They remembered her kindness, her love for her sons, and the pain she went through before she passed away. They brought up old stories, old photos, and old interviews. The letter made her feel close again, like she had never really left. That feeling reached into people's hearts, and it showed. At the same time, people started to look at Harry differently. For years he had been judged. Some had called him rebellious, others said he had turned his back on duty. But now, with the letter in the middle of it all, many started to see things from his side. They began to think about the loss he carried. They saw the pain that never left, and some began to fall back their judgment. The letter softened how some people viewed the royal family too. For once they saw raw emotion. They saw Charles not as a king but as a father trying to do something right even if it came late. The image of the royals always standing apart began to bend. That cold and distant line started to fade, replaced by something more open. But not everyone felt the same. There were those who didn't buy the story. They felt like the letter had been used. They believed it was shared at the perfect moment, just when it could bring good press. They didn't trust the timing. Some thought it was meant to stop Harry from speaking out again. This believed it was a way for the crown to clean up its image. Learn could agree, and that's what made the story grow even more. Every news channel had a different take. Every paper had a different headline. The public split into groups. Some stood by Harry, some defended the monarchy, others were just confused. Even in other countries the news spread. People in America, Australia, and beyond picked it up. Late-night shows made jokes but also spoke from the heart. Writers poured out pieces. Podcast picked apart every detail. The ripple kept growing. It moved through every space. Newsrooms, living rooms, online threads. The lack of answers from the royal family pushed more people to come up with their own. The palace didn't step in to explain, so others filled the gap. And just like that, a single letter started to shake things up. It didn't just change Harry, it changed how people looked at all of them. It made the story about feelings, not just titles. The letter had brought something out of hiding, not just emotions but reality, the truth about pain, about family, about the price of being royal. It pulled back the curtain just enough for people to take a closer look. Even those who didn't care much about the royals before started to pay attention.